This story is based off Egill's saga. The tale recounts his progression from youthful savagery to mature wisdom. It all began with his legendary grandfather Kveldulf, a revered berserker and an Ulfhednar, a member of Scandinavia's most fearsome warriors. He earned the name Kveldulf, which means evening wolf, because of his erratic temper at nightfall. During that time, Norway was under the iron rule of King Harald Fairhair, who sought to unite the land through bloodshed and conquest. Kveldulf, however, refused to bend the knee to the king, neither swearing allegiance nor openly defying him. He allowed his son, however, Thorolf, to join Harald's retinue, securing peace for himself despite his neutrality. Thorolf would rise as a hero at the Battle of Hasvejord, a decisive clash that cemented Harald's control over Norway. Rewarded with governorship of the northern realms, Thorolf's power soon began to threaten the king. Harald assembled an army and attacked Thorolf's hall. When Thorolf refused to surrender, Harald would set the hall aflame, and as Thorolf's warriors rushed out, they were met with a hail of arrows, but they formed a steadfast shield wall. A melee ensued, and in the chaos, Thorolf was slain by Harald's hand, apparently collapsing at the king's feet. Grief-stricken and enraged, Kveldulf demanded compensation, but Harald refused. Thus, a blood feud began. Kveldulf and his second son Skallagrim sought vengeance, killing many of Thorolf's murderers, including 2 of the king's cousins, before fleeing to Iceland. However, Kveldulf's body, ravaged by age and his recent berserker frenzy, failed him, and he succumbed to illness during the journey. Yet Skallagrim would thrive in Iceland, and he took up a peaceful livelihood as a farmer and blacksmith, living to an old age. He fathered 2 sons, Thorolf the eldest and Egill the youngest. This is the tale of Egill, born into exile, a man who would inherit the fierce spirit of his grandfather. He had the heart of a berserker, the mind of a master of runic magic, and the soul of a poet. Egill would rise to become the greatest Scandinavian skald, his epic quests and deeds echoing across the ages. This is his story. Egill was born in Iceland in around the year 904. At just 3 years old, his stature was remarkably advanced, rivaling that of boys twice his age. He was a very talkative child, yet his temperamental nature made him a challenging child to manage. A pivotal incident at 7 years old showcased his volatile personality. After being defeated in a ball game by an older boy, Egill's rage led him to fetch an axe and bury it in the older boy's skull, killing him. By 12, Egill had developed into a towering figure, surpassing most men in size and strength. However, when he and a friend dared to confront his father in a game of strength, Skallagrim unleashed his fury at nightfall, killing Egill's companion by slamming him into the ground. Only the intervention of Egill's devoted thrall, who sacrificed herself to calm Skallagrim, spared Egill's life. Overcome with grief and anger, Egill retaliated by killing one of his father's prized thralls. As a result, Egill and his father Skallagrim didn't mutter a word to each other all winter. Egill sure could have done with some assistance from today's paid partner, BetterHelp. Feeling overwhelmed by the pressure to make big changes in your life in 2025? It's not just about external expectations. Maybe you're also feeling stuck or anxious about falling behind. It's tough when everything around you seems to be moving fast, but it's important to remember that you can set your own pace. This is how a therapist can help. They offer support in managing feelings of comparison or self-doubt. They can also create a realistic timeline that aligns with your true desires, not your external demands. The new year offers a fresh start, a chance to rewrite your story. BetterHelp makes it easy to take the first step towards meaningful change. Complete a quick questionnaire and be matched with a therapist in just a few days. With online therapy, you can access support comfortably and conveniently. Choose from a diverse network of highly qualified professionals with various specialities. If you ever feel your therapist isn't the right fit, you can switch at no extra cost. BetterHelp vets its therapists carefully, and their customer support is always available to assist you. It has over 7,000 positive reviews and a 4.5-star rating on Trustpilot. So start fresh any day of the year with BetterHelp. Click the link in the description or go to betterhelp.com/historyprofiles to get 10% off your first month of therapy. The following summer, Egill's older brother Thorolf returned to his father's farm in Iceland after much time in foreign lands. Egill would ask his brother if he would take him abroad. Thorolf, however, didn't know what to say, since Egill was such a nuisance at home, but in the end he agreed. On this trip, Thorolf got engaged to a woman named Asgerd. He asked her father Bjorn and uncle Thorir for permission to marry. While staying with Lord Thorir, Egill became attached to his son Arnibjorn, who became Egill's lifelong friend. Soon enough, Egill would journey to a farm belonging to King Eric Bloodaxe, the son of King Harald Fairhair, who had exiled Egill's father and grandfather from Norway. Egill and the men soon made their way to the farm buildings and found a man named Bard outside. They told him of their journey and that they would stay for the night to dry their clothes and get some warmth. Egill's party were also awfully thirsty, but Bard said he had no ale in the house and only had curd, a sour yogurt-type drink. As the evening sun dipped beneath the horizon, King Eric and Queen Gunhilda of Norway arrived at the farm, where Bard had meticulously prepared a banquet in their honour. The night unfolded with feasting and merriment, but Egill's presence soon cast a shadow over the festivities. With biting wit and poetic venom, he relentlessly ridiculed Bard due to his lie. Moreover, his unquenchable thirst for ale only served to further embarrass his host. Queen Gunhilda, her patience worn thin by Egill's behaviour, resolved to take matters into her own hands. With a subtle smile, she offered him a cup of ale, its contents tainted with poison. Undaunted by this gesture, Egill responded with cunning and guile. He pricked the palm of his hand with a knife, inscribing ancient runes on the horn with his own life blood. As Egill uttered an incantation beneath his breath, the horn shattered in his hands, its fragments scattering across the hall. Egill then drew his sword, and with deadly precision, struck Bard through the chest, slaying him. Then he would make his escape. King Eric ordered his men to pursue Egill and kill him on sight. Yet, fate intervened once more, as Egill commandeered a longboat after vanquishing its 3 guards in a fierce combat. Reunited at last with Thorir and his friend Arnibjorn, they would comfort Egill, telling him how Bard deserved death. However, they knew many people found it hard to deal with the king's anger. Regardless, Thorir told Egill that he would talk to the king for him. Thorir had offered to pay a fine for Egill's actions, and promised to take responsibility for him. However, King Eric said what his father and co-king Harald Fairhair had said had proven true, that Egill's family would never be trustworthy. The king then told Thorir, "I will accept some payment for what Egill did, but he cannot stay in my kingdom for long." A substantial fine was then given to Thorir, and Egill was given some time to prepare for his exile. Egill's path of pillage and plunder led him to the shores of Courland, present-day Latvia, claiming wealth and spoils through sheer force of arms. However, the Courlanders retaliated with ferocity, pursuing Egill's raiding party. Outnumbered and outmaneuvered, Egill and his companions were captured and bound, and taken to a wealthy farm, their fate to be decided by their captors. But Egill's unyielding spirit refused to be shackled. With immense strength, he worked tirelessly at the post to which he was tied, eventually loosening it from the floor As the post crashed to the ground, Egill slipped free, using his teeth to liberate his hands from their bonds. With his limbs finally unbound, he swiftly freed his comrades. Under the cover of darkness, they crept through the farmstead, seeking out an armory to rearm themselves. They also found a portion of the farm's treasure and stole many costly things and much silver. With their spoils in hand, they made their way to Denmark, where they lay in wait for unsuspecting merchant ships to plunder. It was during this time that Harald Bluetooth had ascended to the Danish throne, following the demise of his father Gorm. Egill's campaign of pillage continued in Denmark, as he led daring raids on towns and villages, often finding himself at the forefront in battles against the Danish forces. His fearless demeanour and brute strength earned him a fierce reputation. As Egill and his brother Thorolf were in Saxony, they chanced upon an opportunity. They heard a rumour that King Æthelstan of England was seeking valiant mercenaries to bolster his forces. The monarch's audacious conquests had ignited a firestorm of resentment among the various kingdoms of Britain, as he had ruthlessly annexed their territories, forging a vast, imposing empire. The ancient city of York, once renowned as Jorvik, had fallen under his sway. Its previous rulers, the proud descendants of the legendary Ivar the Boneless, had been forcibly expelled from power and relegated to obscurity. Northumbria too had been subjugated to his will, its people forced to submit to the English crown. Æthelstan's invasion of Scotland had prompted Constantine II to yield to his authority, while Analf, the King of Dublin, and another scion of Ivar's illustrious lineage, seethed with a deep-seated desire for vengeance against the English monarch. As tensions escalated and alliances were forged in opposition to Æthelstan's rule, a grand rebellion began to take shape. Dublin, Scotland, factions within Northumbria still loyal to their ancestral heritage, and Strathclyde, all united against the king who had dared challenge their sovereignty. It was amid this backdrop of chaos that Egill and his companions resolved to offer their services to the English king. Journeying to Wessex, they presented themselves at Æthelstan's court. The king received them warmly, recognizing potential allies in these battle-hardened warriors. As Egill's raiding party swelled in numbers, now comprising 300 seasoned fighters, they pledged their allegiance, becoming King Æthelstan's men. However, what Egill didn't know is that the battle that was brewing would be one of the biggest and most famous in England's whole history. In the fateful year of 937, the stage was set for a climactic battle. Egill and his brother Thorolf, armed with swords of exquisite craftsmanship, stood ready to face the enemy. As the battle commenced, Egill charged forward with unyielding ferocity, his sword slicing through the chaos, while Thorolf fought with equal valour. As night began to fall, casting a dark veil over the blood-soaked landscape, both sides made camp, their weary warriors seeking respite from the carnage. It was then that Thorolf and Egill were summoned to meet King Æthelstan, who expressed his profound gratitude for their courageous advance. The king's words were laced with sincerity, as he pledged his heartfelt friendship to the brothers. The evening wore on, filled with tales of valour and camaraderie shared between the king and his newfound allies. With dawn's break, King Æthelstan roused his army once more, convening a council with his captains to strategize their next move. He arranged his forces with meticulous care, assigning Thorolf to command a select group of warriors, while instructing Egill to remain with his own men. Thus, fate decreed that the brothers would be separated as they marched into battle. As the second day of combat unfolded, Thorolf found himself facing an impenetrable shield wall of Scots. The warriors would thrust halberds at him from all directions, until he finally succumbed beneath their relentless assault. As news of Thorolf's demise reached Egill's ears through a victorious war cry from his enemies, it ignited within him an unquenchable fury. Egill put himself in the vanguard with his sword raised, and felled many men. He would slay a man named Egill himself, and would cause his men to flee. Egill and his force pursued, and slew all the men whom they overtook. The Scots, seeing their army flee, also began running, whereupon Egill and his men made for where King Analf's division was, intercepting them at the flanks. Egill's men soon wrought great havoc. The division wavered and broke up, and many of King Analf's men fled. Egill's Norsemen would then cry a shout of victory. Thus, King Æthelstan won the Battle of Brunanburh, and was able to preserve his England, with Egill and his fallen brother Thorolf being some of the heroes of the battle. After Egill had found and buried his brother, he went to see King Æthelstan at the victory feast. There was much noise of merriment, and when the king saw Egill was there, he bade that Egill should sit in the high seat facing the king. Egill sat down there and cast his shield before his feet. He had his helm on his head and laid his sword across his knees. At this point, Egill would have been around 34 years old. He was described as large-featured, broad of forehead, with large eyebrows, a nose not long but very thick, lips wide and long. His chin was exceedingly broad. He was thick-necked and big-shouldered beyond other men, hard-featured and grim when he was angry. He was well-made, more than commonly tall, had hair wolf-grey and thick, but became bald early. He was black-eyed and brown-skinned. King Æthelstan mirrored Egill's posture, also laying his sword across his knees, and presented an arm ring forged in solid gold, alongside 2 chests overflowing with silver. Æthelstan said the silver was for Egill's father, as Thorolf had sacrificed himself for him in battle. Egill would winter in Wessex and composed numerous poems about Æthelstan, naming him the Victorious. Æthelstan would gift Egill 2 more arm rings and a very expensive cloak that the king had once worn. Æthelstan invited Egill to stay in his court as his man. However, Egill was bound by honour to return to Norway and see if his fallen brother had fathered a child with his wife, as he was now bound to look after the family. Thus, Egill would sail once more for Norway. Egill soon met his late brother's widow, Asgerd, and vowed to be her protector. In time, however, he fell in love with her, and they married. Some years later, Asgerd's father, Bjorn the Wealthy, died in Norway, but she was denied his inheritance. The entire estate was claimed by Asgerd's half-sister, who had married Bjorn Jæmund. Egill sought to claim half of the inheritance for Asgerd, but the prospects were grim, as Bjorn Jæmund was a favoured ally of King Eric and his consort Gunhild. The dispute was brought to court, where Bjorn Jæmund argued that Asgerd had no right to the estate due to the circumstances of her birth, as her mother had eloped without approval of her kin. Egill's closest friend, Arnibjorn, countered with witness, who testified that Asgerd had been recognised as the rightful heir. However, Queen Gunhild intervened, sending her men to disrupt the proceedings. In a fit of anger, Egill threatened anyone who attempted to claim the disputed farm, and fled by ship. King Eric, enraged by Egill's words once more, set out to hunt him down. He ordered his death, and the deaths of all men protecting him. A small skirmish ensued, during which Egill managed to hurl a javelin, killing one of King Eric's kin, and the steersman of his ship. However, Egill lost several men as well, and realising he had no choice but to leave Norway once more, Arnibjorn gifted Egill a strong and beautiful ship, enabling him to flee with his new wife. King Eric once more declared Egill an outlaw, free for any man to kill. Enraged and devastated by his ill luck, Egill cursed King Eric and uttered these words: "Requite him, righteous gods, for robbery of my wealth. Hunt him away, be wroth, high Odin, heavenly powers, foe of his folk, base king. May Frey and Njord make flee, hate him land guardians hate, who holy ground hath scorned." Harald Fairhair set his sons to rule in Norway when he began to grow old. Eric he made king above all his other sons, but he would kill 2 of his brothers who were rivals to the crown to secure his dominance, thus becoming known as Bloodaxe. During this time, Egill's movements were under constant surveillance, and sightings of him were often reported to the king. By chance, calm winds would take Egill's ship back to Norway, and as Egill and his men rowed to land, he came to learn that there was a farm there that belonged to Rognvald, who was King Eric's son. Once Egill learned this, he told his men to arm themselves. He went up into the island and along the border of a wood. He had now drawn a hood over his helm, and Egill and his men would massacre the men on the farm, killing Eric's son Rognvald. Even princes were not exempt from the Berserker's rage. Not satisfied with killing Eric's son, Egill cursed him once more. He erected a nithing pole, which is a long wooden pole with a recently cut horse head at the end. After that, in a solemn form of curse, he thus spoke: "Here set I up a curse pole, and this curse I turn on King Eric and Queen Gunhilda. This curse I turn also on the guardian spirits who dwell in this land, that they may all wander astray, nor reach or find their home, till they have driven out of the land King Eric and Gunhilda." He then planted the pole in the ground and let it stand there. The horse's head he turned inwards to the mainland, but on the pole he also cut runes, expressing the whole form of the curse. Egill would then make his way to the place of his birth in Iceland. Once again, his family had been exiled from Norway, as his father and grandfather had been so many years ago. Egill would reconcile with his father Skallagrim, but he soon died after his return. Thus, Egill took charge of the farm. However, before Egill left for Iceland, Queen Gunhilda had a spell worked. She said, "Egill Skallagrímsson will find no rest until our paths cross once more." In his second summer in Iceland, Egill would soon grow melancholic and depressed. Perhaps the spell was working. He would soon gather a crew and prepare for a summer voyage. He wanted to sail to England and seek his old friend King Æthelstan. Egill sailed past Scotland, but a fierce storm soon struck, casting his ship and crew upon the shores of Northumbria. Though all his men survived, the ship was shattered beyond repair. To his shock, Egill learned that King Eric Bloodaxe had been ousted from Norway by his younger brother Hakon the Good. Fleeing his homeland, Eric had found refuge in Northumbria, where Æthelstan of England had appointed him king to defend the northern lands against the Scots and Irish. Egill's curse had proven true. Eric had lost his throne, but by ill luck, Egill was in a kingdom of a man who wanted him dead. To his further surprise, Egill discovered that his old friend Arnibjorn had risen to lordship, now serving as Eric's man. Determined not to flee but to face his fate, Egill boldly sought Arnibjorn's dwelling. When they met, the two embraced, and Arnibjorn agreed to speak on Egill's behalf to King Eric. But the king unmoved declared, "I need not count the crimes on thy hands, for they are so many and grievous that he must die." Gunhild, Eric's fierce wife, urged the swift execution of Egill, reminding her husband of the bloodshed he had caused, the kin slain, and the curse he had cast upon them. Yet, Arnibjorn, ever loyal to his friend, spoke in his defence. If Egill has spoken ill of the king, let him atone with words of praise that shall endure forever. Eric, after a long silence, relented. Egill shall live this night, he decreed. Take him home with you, and bring him to me in the morning. Thus Egill was given one last night of life. At Arnibjorn's urging, Egill was forced to compose a poem in praise of Eric, a man he despised, to save his life. Thus, Egill set to work, crafting verses to honour the very king who had brought him such suffering. Egill stayed up all night composing his poem. The following morning, Egill was marched into the king's court, and he recited his poem in a loud voice. Westward I sailed the wave, within me Odin gave. The sea of song I bear, so 'tis my wont to fare. I launched my floating oak, when loosening ice floes broke. My mind a galleon fraught, with load of minstrel thought. A prince doth hold me guest, praise be his due confessed. Of Odin's mead let draught, in England now be quaffed. Loud bear I to the king, loudly his honour sing. Silence I crave around, my song of praise is found. Sire, mark the tale I tell, such heed beseems thee well. Better I chaunt my strain, if stillness hushed I gain. The monarch's wars in word, widely have peoples heard. But Odin saw alone, bodies before him strown. Swelled of swords the sound, smiting bucklers round. Fiercely waxed the fray, forward the king made way. Struck the ear while blood streamed from glaives in flood. Iron hailstorms song, heavy, loud and long. Lances, a woven fence, well-ordered bristle dense. On royal ships in line, exulting spearmen shine. Soon dark with bloody stain, seethed there in angry main. With war's fleets thundering sound, with wounds and din around. Of men many a rank, mid showering darts sank. Glory and fame, gat Eric's name. More may yet be told, and men silence hold. Further feats and glory, fame hath noised in story. Warriors' wounds were rife, where the chief waged strife. Shivered swords with stroke, on blue shield rims broke. Breastplates ringing crashed, burning helm fire flashed. Biting point of glaive, bloody wound did grave. Odin's oaks, they say, in that iron play. Baldric's crystal blade, bowed and prostrate laid. Spears crossing dashed, sword edges clashed. Glory and fame, gat Eric's name. Red blade the king did wield, ravens flocked o'er the field. Dripping spears flew madly, darts with aim full deadly. Scotland's scourge let feed, Wolf the ogress's steed. For urn of downtrod dead, dainty meal was spread. Sword battle cranes, o'er course-strown lanes. Found flesh foal's bill, of blood its fill. While deep the wound he delves, around grim raven's beak, blood fountains break. Axe-furnished feast, for ogress's beast. Eric on the wave, to wolves' flesh banquet gave. Javelins flying sped, peace affrighted fled. Bows were bent amain, wolves were battle fain. Spears and shivers split, sword teeth keenly bit. Archers' strings loud sang, arrows forward sprang. he back his buckler flings, from arm beset with rings. Swordplay stirrer good, spiller of foeman's blood, waxing everywhere witness true I bear. East o'er billows came Eric's sounding name. Bent the king his yew, bees wound-bearing flew. Eric on the wave to wolves' flesh banquet gave. Yet to make more plain, I to men were fain. High-souled mood of king, but must swiftly sing. Weapons when he takes, the battle goddess wakes. On ship's shielded side streams the battle tide. Gems from wrist he gives, glittering armlets rives. Lavish ring despiser, loves not hoarding miser. Frodi's flower of gold gladdens rovers bold. Prince bestoweth scorning, pebbles hand adorning. Foeman might not stand for his deathful brand. Yew-bow loudly sang, sword blades meeting rang. Lances aye were cast, still he the land held fast. Proud Eric, prince renowned, and praise his feats hath crowned. Monarch at thy will, judge my minstrel skill. Silence thus to find, sweetly cheered my mind. Moved my mouth with word, from my heart's ground stirred. Draught of Odin's wave, due to warriors brave. Silence I have broken, a sovereign's glory spoken. Words I knew well fitting, warrior councils sitting. Praise from the heart I bring, praise to honoured king. Plain I sang and clear, song that all could hear. King Eric sat tall, his gaze fixed upon Egill as he recited the poem. When the final words fell silent, Eric spoke. The poem is well sung. With a stern command, he allowed Egill to leave, but on the condition that he never again appear before the king's eyes, or any of the royal family's eyes again. Grateful, Egill thanked Arnibjorn, and in return, gifted him 2 golden arm rings that Æthelstan had once given him. Then, he set forth for Wessex, to visit the king he had once fought for. In Wessex, Egill found King Æthelstan fostering Thorstein, a kinsman of Arnibjorn. While there, news arrived from Norway that Thorstein's father had died, leaving him a great inheritance. Thorstein, Arnibjorn and Egill soon made plans to sail to Norway to claim their inheritance. Before their departure, however, King Æthelstan persuaded his old friend Egill to remain in England, where he would command his armies once their task was complete. Egill agreed, but said he first had to go to Iceland to see his wife and see the property he had there. Thus, Æthelstan and Egill parted with much friendship. Hakon the Good, the son of Harald Fairhair, had been raised as a foster son in the court of King Æthelstan. Thorstein, seeking his inheritance, presented his case with witness, proving his rightful claim. The king, well pleased, granted him his possessions. Egill too approached King Hakon to settle his grievance. He claimed that land once belonging to Bjorn Yeoman was actually his wife's, explaining that he had previously sought justice from King Eric. Hakon, however, denied Egill's claim, citing the bloodshed between their kin. Yet, out of respect for Egill's friendship with Æthelstan, Hakon spared him, granting him peace and freedom throughout Norway. During his time in Norway, Egill would come into conflict with a Swedish berserker named Lejot the Pale, who was challenging Norwegian farmers to Holmgang duels, seizing their lands and daughters. Lejot had insulted one of Arnibjorn's kinsmen, and as Arnibjorn was Egill's closest friend, the man who had saved his life from Eric Bloodaxe, Egill felt honour bound to defend his friend's kin. He challenged Lejot to a duel, and slew the berserker in a Holmgang. Egill then returned to Iceland, spending years with his family. During this time, both King Æthelstan and King Eric Bloodaxe would die, marking the end of two pivotal chapters in Egill's life: his dear friend Æthelstan of England, and his bitter foe Eric Bloodaxe, King of Norway and later Northumbria. Once more, Egill returned to Norway, joining Arnibjorn in raiding. They would ravage Saxony and Frisia, and Egill even fought alongside King Hakon's champions, where he killed far more enemies than his companions, further cementing his legend as a warrior. In his later years, Egill returned once more to Iceland, becoming a formidable force in local politics. He lived to the age of 91, though his once mighty body grew heavy and stiff, his sight dimmed, and his hearing dulled. He eventually became fully blind as death drew near. His final wish was to take with him the 2 chests of silver King Æthelstan had once gifted him, and he sought to toss the treasure into a crowd at the Hill of Laws, letting the people fight over it. Denied this by his family, he commanded 2 enslaved men to help him hide his silver. In his final act of violence, he killed them to keep his secret, and thus was born the legend of Egill's hidden treasure, which may still lie buried in Iceland's soil today. Egill indeed was a complicated man. He was defined by virtues of honour, loyalty, respect, and friendship that he cherished above all. To break these codes was to invite his wrath, and whether through force or poetry or sorcery, he would destroy those who dare offend him. His moral compass reflected the harsh world of Scandinavia at the time, where honour and reputation were everything. It has been speculated that Egill suffered from bipolar disorder, marked by his berserk fury and the many killings during his lifetime, beginning when he was just 7. The strange size and shape of his head may have also been caused by Paget's disease, a condition that thickens bones and leads to blindness. In his 91 years, Egill was not only a warrior, berserker and sorcerer, but also a master of runes, wielding their magic to aid him in countless trials. A poet of unparalleled skill, he became a champion of King Æthelstan and a nemesis to King Eric Bloodaxe. He triumphed in many single combats, becoming known as one of the finest duelists of the age. He is also thought by many to be one of the greatest poets and skalds in Scandinavian history, credited with introducing end rhyme into the Old Norse verse. Egill's saga, written around the mid-13th century, spans the years of 850 to the year 1000, immortalising the life of a man who was both a legend in his time and a symbol of the fierce, complex world of Viking Scandinavia. Take from it what you will, for his story remains one of the most detailed and incredible in the sagas. I hope you all enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to like, subscribe and share, and I'll see you all soon for another History Profile.